Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Can we live longer, happier, and healthier? Dr. David Bernstein says yes, and today he'll show us how. Dr. David, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, Bill, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today and in your studio.
Now, you've written a wonderful book, The Power of Five, the ultimate formula for longevity and remaining youthful. I think you covered everything there. I want to be youthful. We want to live a long time. And if I'm reading it correctly, you've observed 5 characteristics that lead to a much happier, healthy, and longer life. Can you tell us about those?
Well, I'm delighted to talk to you, and knowing that you're on Long Island because that's where I grew up. I grew up in New Hyde Park, and I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to take care of older adults, and I did. I became a geriatrician. And one of the things I had the great fortune of doing is taking care of people who had these great lives. And I dissected and distilled down the features that made them the happiest and the healthiest. And I came up with an acronym with 5 letters. The letters spell the word grace. And these people had goals or a purpose in their life. They knew their DNA, their roots. They had a positive attitude, which was often filled with gratitude and kindness. They had companionship. They had a mate, and they mated for life, and they interacted favorably and effectively with their environment, which meant they took care of their outside environment and their ecology, but they took care of their inside, their body. They ate right. They exercised. They did the things to make their health span and their lifespan the best possible.
And as you explained earlier, you are a medical doctor, so these are the people you see, and obviously you know if they're coming in, they can't fool you. They could tell me just because they look good, they feel good, but you obviously know it because they're coming to you as their physician and asking for your help and what they should do to change things in life if they want to feel better. Am I correct?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And, it was a big thing about the ask and follow advice. So that was another very important factor in that. But there were people who were very self-motivated, and I had some wonderful patients who just displayed that. And I would do speaking engagements, and I would ask people what were the contributors, and all those people who had these long lives and were living in their retirement and would come out in the community to learn a little bit more. They all demonstrated those characteristics.
Now, we all feel we're living in the good old USA. We're number one. We're the best. We like to think that way. Are we in terms of medical and healthcare?
We are the country that spends the most money per capita on healthcare.
Wait, you changed that a little bit. I said, are we doing better? And you said, we spend the most money. Is that good?
We spend the most money, but we don't get the best care.
Okay.
We do not have the best health of countries in the world. We lag behind 11 industrialized countries in health and healthcare. So there's a lot to be desired from where we are as a country and where we are in terms of health.
Now, I copied down a quote from your book where you said, we're living longer but not healthier. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it seems like the opposite would be there if we're living longer. Aren't we healthier?
There's a lot of chronic disease in our society. If we think back to 50 years ago, life expectancies were shorter, and people retired at age 65 and they died at age 66. Made Social Security work really well and get funded, but people didn't have long periods of disability. And now with the chronic diseases that we see all the time, people are living longer and life expectancies have lengthened, but much of that time is spent in chronic disease, heart disease, neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and dementia and cancer. So there are people who live longer. And by the way, in the last 2 years, life expectancies have shortened, primarily due to COVID and the opioid epidemic. But nonetheless, we started to see that, and you and I are in the last generation who will live longer than our children. Our children's life expectancies, millennials and Gen X, will have shorter life expectancies than baby boomers.
Wow, and that's something that should impress all of us. It's great for us that we're doing this, but of course we always look down to our children and we want the best for them, the better education, the better home, the larger vacations, et cetera, et cetera. I think in your book you bring something out in several portions of the book that it's really up to us to control our health. Would that be a fair statement that that's the overriding point of your book?
Exactly. That was the motivation for me writing it, is because there is wisdom and there is knowledge about what we can do, but it's not being incorporated into people's lives. And that's why I came up with a formula that people can easily assimilate, or at least I think easily assimilate. I made it just pretty simple to 5 items. I didn't go and make this exhaustive list where people are running around and trying to do a bunch of things, but I made it pretty simple because we have become a country of chronic disease, and there are things we can do about it. And our healthcare system is letting us down. And this is one of those areas where I think we as humans and individuals have to take the bull by the horn and wrestle with the fact that our healthcare system is going to see that we do some of the preventive things, mammograms and colonoscopies, and give some advice. But we as individuals need to assimilate and make the changes that we have to make, because nobody's going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves.
And you point out in your book, and this is something that, by the way, I love your book, The Power of Five. One, it's simple enough that I can understand it. And I mean that for our entire audience. It's not written in medical terms for other doctors. There's probably a few of them in there, but you dumb it down for us, which is what I certainly need. And if I'm going to follow the instructions, having to fight through medical terms makes it more difficult. You make it very simple. You give a lot of real-world examples. But something I was surprised with, so many of your patients, and of course you don't use the real names, but you'll tell them exactly what to do, and they'll either resist or simply nod their head and come back 3 months later, and they'll be open and tell you, no, they haven't followed that advice. Am I correct?
It happened a lot. It probably happened even more in the last 5 years or maybe 10 years with people addressing questions on the internet, and they would come in to see me, and I'd say, oh, so you consulted Dr. Google, huh? And Dr. Google said you have arthritis, but I think he missed a couple of points, and you actually have gout. And so people will synthesize information, but it's not always the most helpful, and they don't know their sites. And to keep things relatively current, in a very recent article and study that was published, it compared prescription statin medications to a whole bunch of different supplements that are available for people to prevent heart disease on their own. And the supplements failed miserably compared to statin medications. And statin medications in my day had been really expensive, and they're pretty inexpensive now. There's this thought that there's a lot of side effects associated with them. Not only do they lower cholesterol and reduce risk of heart disease, they probably have some impact on the occurrence of cancers. So people are embracing taking a pill or putting a pill in their mouth as opposed to making the lifestyle adjustments that I talk about, making dietary changes, making physical activity changes, or sleeping differently, and some of the other things I talk about, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to mention.
And some of the things you bring out in your book are, at least to me, extremely simple. And I mean that as a compliment. It wouldn't be hard for people, nor would it be expensive to take advantage of them. And yet it seems, again, I was kind of shocked at this, because I was always brought up, you listen to the doctor, you listen to the policeman, you listen to the teacher. But I guess that's different today. And a lot of people hear you say it and they'll nod and they say, we don't believe in eating that or, doing what you're saying, and they'll just go about their life.
Well, one of the examples I had, I think I wrote about it in my book, but I'll never forget the experience I had with it was a female patient, and she had blocked arteries in her leg, and it hurt when she walked, and blood vessels were occluded. And I said, well, I know it's good that you gave up smoking, but red meat is also hazardous for this. And her remark was, oh, I can't give up red meat. I said, well, you may be losing your leg one day, but giving up red meat seems like a pretty easy thing to do. It didn't happen. She's
trading off the possible loss of her leg to continue to eat red meat, if I'm hearing you correctly. Was that right?
And I heard her correctly too. Yes, you heard me correctly. It was remarkable to sit and hear that. It gets back to people taking their own responsibility for things.
Dr. Bernstein, before we go further, we'd like to let our audience know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Dr. David Bernstein. He's the author of The Power of Five, and we're going to ask him, Dr. Bernstein, is there a website where we can learn more, and where can we get this book?
My books are available at Amazon and on my website, and my website is powerof5, that's the number 5, life.com.
And we'll ask you that again. So to our audience, if you didn't get that information down, you have plenty of times, at least 2 more times during the show, when you can jot it down for something so simple. You definitely want to write it down. You're going to be talking to someone about this and say, oh, what was that doctor's name again? What was the title of his book? And by the way, if you're enjoying this show and you want a spouse or a friend to listen to it, you can go to nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Just look for Secrets of Success and The Power of Five, and you can listen to a podcast. So you or someone you recommended to can listen to it at their convenience, and then go out and get the book. And a few small changes can make a very, very big difference in your life. Now, Dr. Bernstein, what are you finding are the main threats to our longevity and a good life as people come in to see you? Are there certain diseases, illnesses that are hampering things?
Yeah, there were 3 main diseases that took up most of my time. There were other little incidental things that always tagged along with them. But cardiovascular disease, cancer, and neurodegenerative diseases. Neurodegenerative diseases are like Alzheimer's disease, other dementias, and Parkinson's disease.
Was it coronary cancer and the neuro diseases?
Neurodegenerative diseases, yes, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Oh, so that fits under there. Okay, so those would be the big ones. So we're taking the heavy numbers that are affecting most people. When you're talking about these changes, we're talking about that. And basically, if I put it under a heading, it's basically healthy lifestyle choices that it's up to us with your direction to make and to give us that longevity of life.
Yeah, and I did some of the research on this, and many people think that their genetics plays a role, and certainly it does, but it's in the 20 to 25% realm. So what it means is 75% of the diseases that I just mentioned are not related to genetics, and they're related to lifestyle. And so one of the things I try to put a common thread through those 3 things so that people can address them. Well, the common thread is this condition that's called chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation or acute inflammation is when you get a splinter. But if the splinter stays in your finger for a long time, it festers and gets infected and it creates a lot of inflammation. But it's that inflammation that happens in our blood vessels and in our brains and maybe the contributors to cancer that are lifestyle decisions or come from lifestyle decisions.
Now, you talk about environment as being one of the words that I hear you use throughout the book. Can you explain what you mean? And are those environmental factors things we can control, or is it the air we're breathing and the water we're drinking, which we probably have very little control over?
Well, it's really both, because we should live in the cleanest environment possible, but I talk a lot about our inside environment, what goes on inside us. And so it's what we put in our body or how we treat our body. And so if I may, I developed or recognized that there were 5 things that I thought we had control over in our environment. And I'll say them quickly and then give you a little bit more detail. It has to do with sweets and stress and sleep and sweat and sex. So certain people like to hear about sex, so I included it in my 5, and they all begin with the letter S. So the first thing is sugars and sweets and carbohydrates and food additives and processed foods. Those create this inflammatory process in our body and at the very least damage blood vessels and create this inflammation that can cause neurodegenerative disease and cancer too. And the second one is stress. Stress it causes the release of certain chemicals and hormones like cortisol, which is also damaging to blood vessels. And stress is one of the things that might lead to cancers and vascular disease and neurodegenerative disease and dementia.
It's interesting how you say that, because it seems that's all around us today, because I've just learned from one of the local TV shows that part of what they put out is to incite us a little bit, because it'll get more listeners and more viewers to the show. So they want to throw a topic out there that will get us, I guess, get our stress level up a little bit and say, that's no good. We've got to do something different, or this politician is bad, or that ball player should be traded, or something that will get us all revved up. And in the meantime, we're heightening our stress, and we're taking more of the sugar that you just talked about, and probably causing ourselves more problems.
Those people in those industries know this very well. So, a red banner at the bottom of your TV screen about breaking news, it may be the same news you've heard for the last 3 hours, but that red gets our attention and it drags us in. But the same can be said for the sugar industry. The sugar industry, knowing that sugar is addicting and how much sugar to put in breakfast cereals, and start kids out at an early age and put sweeteners in drinks to get kids addicted to that. And so wasn't that true of the tobacco industry as well, that they knew how addictive nicotine was? So there is a corporation or corporate world out there that knows this stuff better than we do, and we get sucked in.
And what I'm hearing, again, all throughout this interview is what you said at the beginning of it. It's our choices. And now you're instructing us. And as we talked about before the show, we once had a doctor on who talked just about the sugar aspect of foods. And after that, I started looking at labels. My gosh, I was shocked. A cup of cereal, as you said, especially the sugary cereals, can have, I guess, anywhere from 10 to 20 grams of sugar, maybe more. A typical bottle of soda that has sugar in it, 32 grams of sugar. It actually got me to the point of being scared, and I was putting them back very quickly, almost like I was touching something sinful or illegal, because it had so much sugar. And even things that are sold to us like yogurt that is promoted as something healthy, that's almost a dessert now, isn't it?
It is. Some of my patients would tell me, well, I just decided I was really tired, so I had a bowl of cereal for dinner. It's like, or you had cereal for breakfast, and it's like, oh, well, that was dessert for breakfast. It had so much sugar in it. And I remember one of my patients telling me, I eat really healthy, doc. I just had that Raisin Bran. And I Googled it or went home and looked at how much sugar was added to Raisin Bran, and it didn't make it any healthier than anything else out there.
In effect, it's a milk and wheat product that's candy, if I'm correct. And I took that right from your book, because you mentioned that in there. Can you tell our audience what are some of the mistakes, other than what we just mentioned, that most of us probably make every day, and we think we're eating something healthy or doing something good for ourselves? Yes.
The healthiest thing that you can eat comes from a plant. And even if it's a fruit, like a strawberry, it's wrapped. It might have natural sugar in it. Yeah, I've said something about sugar, but it's surrounded by fiber, and that fiber insulates you and that sugar. So your sugar, which is a chemical we need for metabolism for energy, it does need to get metabolized, but it gets metabolized more slowly, and it's a more natural substance. So that's among the things that we've done in my household. Is we eat a plant-based diet, so that most of our stuff is grown and is not processed. The process of converting food into something that's more palatable adds a lot of chemicals and enhances with sugar and high fructose corn syrup to make it more palatable, so people will eat it, and it would be bought and sold by corporations. So that's one of the things. Reading labels is really important, and eating more natural foods.
I think this is a wake-up call for all of us. Before we learn more, Dr. Bernstein, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Dr. David Bernstein. His book is The Power of Five. And Dr. Bernstein would like to know, where can we get this book, and if there's a website where we can learn more?
My book is available on Amazon. And it's also available on my website, which is powerofthe5life.com. And I could be reached at david@powerof5life.com. And with holidays upon us, if people go to my website, I have some free cookbooks and a free downloadable book called Notes on Living Longer.
We love that word free, and if we can live longer, you're matching all the words we love: success, free, and living longer. So we thank you for that. And again, to our audience, even if you don't think this applies to you, just write it down, because in a few days you're going to be talking about it again and say, who was that doctor? Well, his name is Dr. David Bernstein. What was the name of that book? The Power of Five. Easy enough to remember. You won't have to strain to find it. And then when you start looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, I really can control this, and there is a lot of sugar in that food. I've been eating the wrong stuff. And you probably think you're doing the right thing, as Dr. Bernstein brings out in the book. Now, is it the food companies? Are they obviously doing this? It looks good. They're kind of selling it. I keep seeing on, this is the healthy choice. This is the healthy breakfast. This is good for your health. But is it really?
They're still in the business of making money and selling products. So in this day and age, I think things can be labeled in certain ways that can fool us.
You go into another topic in your book, namely exercise. Can you tell us a little bit about your feeling of exercise for people? Do we get enough of it? It seems a lot of people are out there in their gym clothes. They look nice, expensive sneakers. I see people jogging by my house. I see them playing tennis. There's large gyms that look like office buildings all around. Are we getting any better, though?
I think people are adapting and incorporating more physical activity in their day, but sometimes people need some guidelines about where the sweet spots are. And our government has done research and says something like 150 minutes a week is an important component, an important number to reach. That would be as little as 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And so that it does enhance our life expectancy. It does improve our health. So there's no doubt about that. When further research was done, the number 450 minutes, which is 90 minutes of some kind of exercise 5 days a week, is really the sweet spot, and above which there's very little to be gained. But there are people who don't really get to that level. And then there are lots of studies that show that even modest little amounts of physical activity, getting up in your office and walking for 3 minutes, it can have its favorable effects. The really bad thing is just sitting all day. And I know in our current environment of people working remotely that they're going to sit for far too long. And it's important to get up and move around and just be even a little active during the course of the day, because that inactivity is really hazardous to our health.
And really what you're saying, if I'm hearing it correctly, anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes a day. And even if we look on the low end, that could be walking to and from the train. We could get a good portion of that if we just park our car 2 or 3 blocks away from the store we're going to and walk back and get some walking exercise. And perhaps 1 or 2 days either go to the gym or do some free weight exercises or push-ups in our basement. Am I hearing you correctly?
You are hearing me correctly. And one of the things that was interesting to me that I read a few years ago is that New Yorkers were healthier than many other cities, or the people who lived in those cities, because they did have to walk more. They took public transportation, they walked to and from a train or a subway, and they got some of that physical activity in there. And my grandfather, when I was growing up, lived in Queens and walked a fair distance to take the subway into Manhattan, and got off on 42nd Street and walked to 39th Street and walked down the block. And he did that 5 days a week and lived well into his 80s. So that amount of physical activity was good for him.
And I think now we all have the opportunity, or we even have it already, the Fitbit or the watches that will keep track of our steps. So we can tell if we're actually walking 2.5 miles a day or 10 miles a day, or, just to make it a contest, and maybe for those of us who are a little more goal-oriented, to achieve a certain level. We keep hearing that word cholesterol. That seems to be coming up in everybody's life as we get older. Are there any tips you can give us about controlling cholesterol or doing better with it?
cholesterol is really important, but so is blood sugar and diabetes control too. So we talked a little bit about the carbohydrate part. Making dietary changes to reduce fat is really important. And in this day and age, it's really hard. And sometimes accepting a prescription from a physician to get your cholesterol down is a reasonable thing to do. But reducing animal fats is really helpful. In our household, we no longer eat any kind of animal fat. But even then, it's still hard to keep cholesterol where I want it to be. But animal fat and dairy products can be really hazardous and lead to the vascular complications of our life in this day and age.
And I guess we don't really know what the big businesses are putting into those animals that are producing that animal fat. Am I correct? There's probably some chemicals going into them for larger, stronger, more profitable animals.
You are correct.
All right. See, I'm learning from your book. Thank you. I'm going to be that one that lives longer and stays happier and healthier. Finally, what about dining out? Here in New York, that's a big thing. We tend to eat out many times, whether it's fast food or a sit-down restaurant. Can you give us a few tips in the next 30 seconds?
Read labels, know where you're going. Prepare yourself when you're going to a restaurant. Know that you can choose a salad with a low amount of, or a low caloric or a low fat dressing, and make wise choices. And ask the wait staff not to put bread on your plate, bread on your table, and butter on your table. So you're not inclined to do that. And if you're inclined to overeat, and I've suffered with that one, have a small healthy snack before you go out to eat, so you don't overindulge, because I think that's part of what happens in our society. We eat too large of portions, and restaurants want to be competitive, and they'll serve big portions, and people will complain if they don't get big portions. And so reduce your portions, and reduce it as a method to control your weight as well.
And I'll give you a trick I use. I pull the belt in one extra notch, so it starts to hurt before I'm eating. And if I'm overeating, it's going to hurt for the rest of the evening. So that's my little trick that I'll add to everything.
I have to add that to my list.
Okay, I'll look for a footnote that has my name on it. Dr. Bernstein, thank you. Before we wrap up, once again, just tell us the website and then where we can get the Power of Five.
My website is powerof5life.com. I also have an online course that's available on that. So if they don't want to read my book, they can take my online course and just sit down for 5 hours and listen to that. And my wit and wisdom will show up there. And all my books are available on Amazon.
Well, you made it easy for us. Now it's up to us, and we have to make the choice, as you say in your book. We want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Bernstein.
Oh, thank you, Bill, for having me. I enjoyed it.
To our audience, you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.